But at John Wesley's death in 1791, there were about 79,000 followers in England and about 40,000 in America. But by 1957, there were 40 million Methodists worldwide. 1957, 40 million Methodists. Do I have any Methodists in the house? I do not fear that the people called Methodists will ever cease to exist. I only fear that they will exist as a dead sect, having a form of religion, but not the power thereof. The power is important. What I want to look at today is I want to talk about redigging the wells. Redigging the wells. In Genesis chapter 26, verses 12 through 14, it says, Isaac planted crops in that land, and in that same year reaped 100-fold. That's a pretty good increase. In that same year, he reaped 100-fold because the Lord blessed him. There's something about the blessing of the Lord. Now, the man became rich, and his wealth continued to grow until he became very wealthy. He had so many flocks and herds, and servants that the Philistines envied him. Isaac planted crops in that same year. Now, if you go back and you read the story in Genesis chapter 21, it talks about there was a famine that hit the land. And this was a different famine than the one that hit in Abraham's time. But Isaac went down to Abimelech, king of the Philistines. I just want to kind of set this picture up for you because there's some things that we're going to pull out of this that's going to be very, very, very challenging. But the Lord appeared to Isaac and told him, don't go down into Egypt, but I want you to go into this land. Now, he says, to you and your descendants. This sounds a lot like what God said to Abraham, and you'll see why I'm making a connection here in a minute. He said, stay in this land for a while. I will be with you, and I will bless you. For to you and your descendants I will give all these lands, and I will confirm the oath that I swore to your father Abraham. So Isaac is receiving the blessing that God placed on Abraham. And as I always say, the blessing of God should go from generation to generation to generation. So in our case, we should have progressed further than our parents progressed. Because there's some things that our parents accomplished and kind of paved the way for us that we can then step into and take it further. Okay? This is what's happening with Isaac. Isaac is receiving the blessing. And the blessing became so powerful. I don't have time to talk about Isaac lying about his wife. His father did the same thing. It's interesting. Verse 12, Isaac planted crops. So he plants these crops and he reaps in the same year 100-fold. He gets a lot of stuff. He had so many flocks and herds and servants that the Philistines envied him. So all the wells, and this is where I want to really start digging into. He said, all the wells that his father's servants had dug in the time of his father Abraham, the Philistines had stopped them, filling them with earth. So his father had already been in this land. His father's servants had dug wells for Abraham's livestock. But at the death of Abraham, the Philistines, the enemy, came and stopped the wells up so that the water wasn't flowing. Y'all stay with me. The water wasn't flowing because the Philistines had filled them up with earth. So now Isaac ends up in the same land. He has this abundance. He has all of these livestock. He needs some water. So he digs again the well. Somebody say, dig the well. So Abimelech said to Isaac in verse 16, move away from us. You have become too powerful for us. The people of God had moved into a land and they had multiplied. They'd become mighty. They'd become powerful. Does this story sound familiar? God's people finds a land to live in and they multiply. It's important to find the place God has designed for you. You will flourish in the courts of the Lord when you are planted in the house. Y'all stay with me. Y'all stay with me. Find that place. He moved away from there and he camped in the valley of Gerar, where he settled. And Isaac reopened the wells that had been dug in the time of his father Abraham, which the Philistines had stopped up after Abraham died, and he gave them the same names his father had given them. Gerar simply means a lodging place. It's a place of dwelling. But the thing that I find very interesting, he called their names by the same name that his father named them. He didn't come up with different names. He built upon the things that his father had done. I do not fear that the people called Methodists will ever cease to exist. I'm convinced that there are some wells that were dug within the Methodist movement that need to be reopened. Oh, let me say it again. There are some wells that have been dug within the Methodist movement that need to be reopened because the enemy has filled them with earth and the water is not flowing. Oh, y'all stay with me. Y'all stay with me. This is just the foundation. Stay with me. Why name them after the same names? Because there's continuity in the purpose of God. God doesn't have to come up with something new every generation. God's work doesn't change. God's mission doesn't change. Methods may change. Methods may change, but the mission never changes. And what is the mission? All righty then. That method has never changed. That's still the mission of that is still the mission of the church. We don't have to come up with a new mission. Make disciples of Jesus for the transformation of the world. Primary task of the church. And it hasn't changed. And I believe if we can unstop the wells, we can see the same type of multiplication that our forefathers saw as they crisscrossed this nation preaching the gospel. Y'all still with me? All right. Psalm 78, and we'll get back to Isaac in a minute, but this is another one of my favorite passages of Scripture. Psalm 78, and I'm not going to read the whole psalm, don't worry. But verse 1 says, sing to the Lord a new song. Sing to the Lord a new song. For he has done marvelous things. His right hand and his holy arm have worked salvation for him. The Lord has made his salvation known and revealed his righteousness to the nations. He has remembered his love. I'm in the wrong psalm. But that one was good too, so I'll finish this one. He has remembered his love and his faithfulness to the house of Israel. All the ends of the earth have seen the salvation of our God. And I wasn't even intending to read that one, but it fell right on in there, didn't it? All the ends of the earth have seen the salvation. Now, Psalm 78 says, my people, hear my teaching and listen to the words of my mouth. I will open my mouth with a parable, and I will teach you lessons from the past. Somebody say, lessons from the past. If you don't know where you came from, it might be a little difficult to see where you're going. I will teach you lessons from the past, things we have heard and known things our ancestors has told us. We will not hide them from their descendants. We will tell the next generation. Watch the continuity. We will tell the next generation the praiseworthy deeds of the Lord, his power and the wonders he has done. He decreed statutes for Jacob, and he established the law in Israel, which he commanded our ancestors. Now watch this. I love it. To teach their children, so the next generation would know them, even the children yet to be born, and they in turn would tell their children. It sounds to me that God intends for his knowledge to be transmitted from generation to generation to generation to generation to generations. So I always have to ask myself, why is the toughest generation to reach with the gospel this current generation? Somebody may have dropped the ball. Verse 7 says, then they would put their trust in God and would not forget his deeds, but would keep his commandments. They would not be like their ancestors, a stubborn and rebellious generation whose hearts were not loyal to God, whose spirits were not faithful to him. I do not fear that the people called Methodists will ever cease to exist. And I believe that God is working to raise up a generation of people who have recaptured the doctrine and the spirit and the discipline of Methodism, and will again understand that we are a people raised up to be involved in renewal and restoration, not, none of y'all, play church. It's about transformation. Can I get a witness? Transformation.